What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I have asked over 2,000 FPL managers some of your questions that you put to me on Twitter. We're going to go through the answers, see what people are looking at in terms of transfers, wildcard moves, early look at Gameweek 8 captaincy, and all that good stuff. If you enjoy it, please do give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you're new around here as well. Let's jump into it. So the first question was about buying Heung-min Son. Now, I put this specifically if you're on a wildcard this week, because I know a lot of people aren't going to just go out and buy him. And it was quite interesting that a big percentage of people still said they wouldn't buy him. Now, you have to remember when you, and this is what I always say to people, like when you ask a lot of people, they're all going to have their individual reasons for saying yes or saying no. And sometimes it will just be because they don't think a player is a genuine option. But for some people, because they can't afford him or because they haven't planned for it, they can't get to a player easy, they'll just say they're not a good option. I've kind of given my opinion on it already. I think I would just to quickly go through it again. I think these four fixtures are okay. I think Son can easily tick over, but it's these four fixtures where I'd really look at a player. And a lot of people made really good comments on my recent videos this week saying that you're talking about going from Lukaku to Son, but would it not be easier to go from Lukaku to Kane? And that is definitely an option. I know Kane isn't playing that well right now, but that fixture run is so good that I would possibly take a punt on going for him for that run when Lukaku's fixtures get a little bit tougher. They're not awful or anything like that, but it is easier to go in one move. In terms of like going for Son this week, I think you do have to sacrifice something on a wild card to do it. Like you can't necessarily have like the strong bench that a lot of people have gone for. You might have to go for one slightly cheaper forward that you wouldn't usually go for as well. There's different ways around doing it, right? You can cheapen out in certain places, but then you have that spot and you can literally go to anyone else. So I still stand by the fact that I don't think he's a must-buy either, and I don't think that he's essential or anywhere close for these next four fixtures. He is a big differential, and this kind of shows you that a lot of people are not thinking of going that way. So if you wanted somewhere, I think one of the reasons people like him is not because he's just really good and he ticks over, but it feels like you get another premium player in your squad, so you can have three premiums without completely hurting the rest of your squad. Whereas if you tried to go for Lukaku, Ronaldo, and Salah, then it hurts even more because you're having to spend an extra 2 million. So I know why people are doing it. He's consistently ticked over so far this season with points. He'll continue to do it while he's in the team, which case he'll always be in there. He's always going to play 80 to 90 minutes. Next four look good, but I really think Game Week 12 is the time where we really have to take note, and that seems to be what a lot of other people are thinking, but he is a nice differential right now. Okay, so I've been there on Twitter. Something happens in FPL and you're suddenly like, you tweet out, well, I've got to get that player. I've got to do this. I've got to permanently captain Mo Salah. Then when you step back and think about it, it's probably not quite as good an option. But when he scored and got the assist at the weekend against Man City, it was like, right, we should really permanently captain Salah. Why are we even looking at anyone else? This week I'm going to captain Salah. Next week, the week after, we're going to captain him. And I'm quite glad to see that most people on this list didn't agree with that he shouldn't be permanently captain every single week. Will you do quite well if you do that? Yes, but you are bound to miss some hauls from other players, and Salah is bound to blank at some point. Even in easier fixtures, Salah will blank at some point, right? That doesn't mean we shouldn't captain in them, but he's not perfect. He's brilliant, but he's not perfect. And I'm one of his biggest fans, right? I'm a Man United fan. I often have to tell Liverpool fans just how good he is. Only some Liverpool fans, by the way, I know most of you realise, like, he is a brilliant player. But the thing is, when stuff like this is a good learning lesson, I think, not just around Salah. When stuff like this happens, you have to ask yourself, what has really changed? So I went and had a look, right, at Salah's stats on Transfer Market for last season, so 2020, 2021. Well, guess what he did against Man City last year? He scored. Guess what he did in the other game against Man City here in Game Week 23? He scored. So we already knew that he could score in those tougher fixtures. Nothing has changed in that. We know it can happen, but the question is, what are the odds of it happening? And that's why you'll always hear me say, when someone like Salah plays Chelsea, Man United, Man City, maybe even Spurs, possibly, maybe even Arsenal to a certain extent as well, but definitely Chelsea, Man United, and Man City for Liverpool. And obviously, if it's a Man City player, then Liverpool, Chelsea, Man United, I'll always try and captain someone else because there's a higher chance of them scoring an easier fixture. I know it sounds so simple, but I think people overcomplicate this sometimes with FPL. So I'm glad most people agree he shouldn't be permanently captain. He's brilliant. We're going to captain him a hell of a lot of times this season. There's very few games when you wouldn't want to do it. But for me, when he's playing Man City, when he's playing Chelsea, it's very easy. You don't want to captain him. So Man City are kind of flavour of the week right now. A lot of people want to get their attackers in. Obviously, Grealish was quite popular. Now, Foden is. A few people looking at Kevin De Bruyne. And as always, right, this is only kind of 2,000 managers that have filled in this form. But I always think if it's someone that's kind of following me or other kind of content creators, they're probably quite engaged with FPL. And their kind of opinion is probably similar to a broader range. Like if I asked 10,000, I suspect we would get similar results. And then if you went and asked 100,000, etc. But obviously it is a small sample size. But you can see from here, there is a large percentage of people, the biggest percentage on this chart, who are not going to own any Man City players going forward. And I don't... sorry, this is Man City attackers specifically, not defenders, right? We'll come on to that later on. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad move because, yes, they've got good fixtures, but there's lots of other really decent players that people have got in their team right now. Lukaku, Jimenez, Antonio. There's people looking at Tony, Armstrong, Hwang up front as well. So fitting in Jesus straight away is quite difficult. And in midfield, again, a lot of people have got Rafinha, Salah. Maybe some people are holding on to Jota. I've got Saka, for example. Now, if I had to have Saka versus Foden versus Grealish, now obviously Saka is a lot cheaper, but just taking that out of the equation right now, if I knew that the Man City players were going to get the same minutes as Saka, of course I would change over. But I don't really have any doubts in my mind that when the Arsenal team sheet comes out, Saka will be on it. And I don't necessarily have that same thing with most of these Man City players. A few people said to me that Kevin De Bruyne is not as nailed as I think he is. I completely disagree. Like, until last season, when it got to the proper business end of the season, like we're talking like the last stages of the Champions League, Kevin De Bruyne started every single Premier League game he was fit for, apart from the game after an injury. So if he was injured for like Game Week 7, he would have come off the bench in Game Week 8. But then from Game Week 9, 10, 11, 12, etc. And that, I'm just pulling random Game Weeks, by the way. I don't remember this specific Game Weeks it was. He would then start. So I think he's about as nailed as it gets as an attacker in that team. And Foden looks pretty good right now as well. And you can see that that's where people are going. And maybe people have kind of slightly gone off Grealish, or perhaps they already own them. So I don't think we need to panic if you don't own Man City attackers. There are lots of other very viable options out there. Man City are going to score the most goals this season. All of their players, pretty much, all of their attackers have pretty good numbers, especially the likes of Jesus, Grealish, Foden, etc., De Bruyne as well, because obviously they mostly play as part of the front three, and De Bruyne gets forward a lot. He's on a lot of set pieces. And plus, he's just brilliant, right? But Foden and Grealish are probably the ones that I would go for. And right now, it probably does look like Foden. He's quite direct. He got the left-hand spot off Sterling last season. He played on the left against Liverpool instead of Grealish as well. So Grealish might still play, but I wonder if he's going to come inside a little bit more and how that might affect him. So Foden looks good right now. There's a lot of people that are just not going to go own any. And if you are someone that is going for the 2 or 3 premium strategy that includes Kevin De Bruyne, that is looking like a massive differential right now. I don't know if I go as far as to captain him over Salah at the moment, but in terms of getting a lot of points from a player that is brilliant, I like that De Bruyne pick. It's just difficult for most of us to fit him in. So a lot of people are still looking at cheaper midfielders, especially if you're trying to fit in the likes of all the players I've just spoken about. Man City attackers with Jimenez, with Antonio, with Lukaku. You probably need someone in midfield that's a little bit cheaper, even a bit cheaper than someone like Sarr. So the 5.5 million midfielders came up quite a lot. And I asked who they thought was who people thought was the best one. And Mbeumo came out by an absolute mile. And again, maybe a little bit of recency bias because he just scored, whereas most of the other ones blanked, I think, at the weekend. Obviously, Townsend did well. Decore and Gray have done well for Everton as well. But Mbeumo's just scored, plus he's got a really nice fixture run coming up. And obviously, I've talked about him quite a bit, so that's probably scaled up his numbers a bit. But that is quite a lead, right? And I do agree with that. I fully agree that he is the best one. I really don't rate Decore as an option at all. I think what happens with players like him is we expect him to be a defensive midfielder, so we don't expect him to go forward. Even though we know he used to do that for Watford, right? We know he used to play box to box a lot of the time. Not always, but some of the time, right? And we know now that he's playing box to box for Everton. So sometimes with players, like, because they're doing a little bit more than expected, we kind of elevate them to a higher level. But I just don't think he's that good of an option still, right? He's doing a good job for Everton. He's playing well. He's a very good box-to-box midfielder. But when I look at the numbers, like, his expected goal involvement's 0.32, which isn't bad. Like, it's not bad for a Decore, But Mbeumo is 0.62. Gallagher is 0.41. I've got it here. Elyounoussi is 0.38. Now, these numbers were only coming after kind of 7 game weeks, so we have to take them with a little bit of a pinch of salt. Doucouré might get his numbers up, Mbeumo's numbers might come down, but I just don't see Doucouré keeping that up. I think eventually they're going to slowly go down. The fixture run coming up for Everton is not that good. So I think if you've got Doucouré, Gray and Townsend, fair enough. They've done well. You made a really good decision. But after that Watford game, the fixtures go south quite quickly. Like, they're not awful fixtures, and I'm sure Everton will do okay in them, right? They've got a good manager. He's going to get them playing well in those fixtures. But I don't know if I would be buying them right now. Like, I think the swing is there to go for Mbeumo. With Gallagher, it's interesting because his numbers started really high because he had some really nice... a couple of goals that were really close to goal, right? So his expected goal numbers went quite high. He's down to 0.41 now. But again, if I come onto the FPL screen and go to Crystal Palace, they've not had the easiest fixture run. They've just had to play Leicester, Brighton, Liverpool, Spurs. I mean, this is a pretty horrible fixture run. Apart from Brentford at home, in which they drew 0-0 anyway, it wasn't that nice of a run at all. Whereas after Arsenal, and to be fair, they've got Man City to come as well, but then in between that, Newcastle, Wolves, Burnley, Villa, Leeds, you're expecting a few more goals in these ones. I do still think, to a certain extent, I think Gallagher looks busy on the eye test, and we kind of think that he looks good. And he is a good player. Like, he's brilliant for Crystal Palace. And from a non-FPL point of view, the fans are going to love him. But I think he just looks busy, and I don't know if he's going to get enough returns. He's only 5.5 million, so he doesn't have to get a huge amount. But I just think Mbeumo is the better option, as do a lot of people. In terms of the other ones, just quickly, Elyounoussi numbers are quite good, 0.38, right? It's not brilliant, but what I like about them is most of that threat is coming from goals rather than assists, or, you know, shots instead of chances created. So he's one to look out for. I don't know if he's completely nailed. Southampton fans, let me know in the comments below. Like, he hasn't started every single game yet. I'm not sure what the deal is there. With the Arsenal players, like, Odegaard numbers just aren't, like, I just don't feel like Odegaard's got enough of a sight for goal. I think he's playing well as a number 10. He'll do really well for Arsenal, but again, like some other players on this list, I think he's going to be a really good player for Arsenal. I don't think he's going to be a very good FPL option. Smith Rowe seems to have a slightly better eye for goal and getting forward a little bit more, but I don't think there's a lot in it. I think Mbeumo really is the standout on this list. I fully agree with that. And I think the Everton players are maybe slightly overhyped, especially Doucouré. I don't think he's a very good option at all from an FPL point of view. Gallagher, let's see after the next few fixtures when they get a bit better. But again, I'm expecting those numbers to come down for him, not go up. I just think he looks busy. He does a great job. But in terms of goal threat and assist threat, I'm just not sure it's quite there. And I just think Mbeumo is a standout. I'm just going to say it out of these ones. And if I'm going for one, it's him. If I had to go for a second one, now that is an interesting question. Realistically, I would really try hard to not have to go for a second 5.5. But it possibly would be Gallagher. Possibly. Like, I'm looking at the numbers. He's got the second highest numbers just behind Townsend. I think I'd probably go Gallagher, but realistically, I would want Mbeumo and I wouldn't want any of the others. I'm going to do a captaincy video next week because I always do one every single week and I like to stay consistent where I can. And it's going to be absolutely pointless, isn't it? I mean, look at this, right? There's some people going for Lukaku. Obviously, they've got Brentford away. Not necessarily a bad fixture. And if Brentford are quite open like they were against Liverpool, where they kind of went for it, but they were exposed at the back as well, then Lukaku could have a field day. And at some point, Lukaku's probably going to do pretty well. Brentford away, Norwich at home, Newcastle away, Burnley at home. In one of those fixtures, he's going to get another brace or he's going to get a hat-trick somewhere. Who knows? It could be the Brentford game. And obviously, I do like the De Bruyne pick as well. I think it's very easy to kind of write him off as an option just because a lot of us either don't own or can't get to him easily. But Man City always put loads of goals against Burnley at home, and I don't. It's not that I believe that because they've done it before it will happen again. I mean, fixtures change, players and managers change as well. Although obviously not Pep Guardiola and Sean Dyche for a long time, but Man City at home are just great anyway. So any easy fixture like Burnley, Norwich, Brentford to a certain extent, Watford definitely, Leeds, etc. They're probably going to put a few goals past. So that fixture looks good. So anyone going for De Bruyne, I like it. I like your style. I'm definitely not going to do that though. I'm going to go Salah, and loads of people are. And you've got to pick your fights to go different. And I'm not sure Salah against Watford is the time to do it. But let's see if my thoughts change when I do the captaincy video. But spoiler alert, they probably don't. So aside from probably Phil Foden, I would say that Hwang Hee-chan, and hopefully I've got that pronunciation at least slightly right, was probably one of the biggest bandwagons to come off Game Week 7 because obviously he got the 2 goals against Newcastle. Now I'm looking at his numbers. I really do like per 90 stats. So expected goals per 90, expected goal involvement per 90, because it equals everyone out. It puts them on a level playing field. But you have to apply some common sense and some context to these numbers, especially when we're only 7 game weeks in, but also when a player like Hwang hasn't played a huge amount of minutes so far, right? He hasn't played all 7 game weeks. He hasn't started. He hasn't played 90 minutes every time. So his numbers so far are 0.64 per 90 for expected goal involvement. That is extremely good, right? If he could do that for the rest of the season, he would be one of the biggest bargains in FPL right now. His numbers at Leipzig the previous season were 0.48. So he does have some credibility in keeping those numbers up. I'm not going to pretend that I've watched him at Leipzig or anything like that, but he looks decent. He's got an eye for goal by the looks of it, and there's also going to chip in with some assist threat, and that seems to be the case now for Wolves. And there was that interview about how, Jimenez can provide the passes, he's going to run onto them, etc. And that little partnership is being worked on. I think people are not maybe as confident as it looks like they are on Twitter and stuff. So there is quite a few people saying he looks like a bargain. There's not really too many saying he's just not worth a spot at all. I'm definitely in the middle. Let's give him some time. I think wildcarders are in a tricky spot that they want to go for him, but they're maybe not quite sure. I think if you've got a team full of relatively safe starters, he's probably not the worst option to go for, especially if you've got a bench. But by the looks of it, he is probably always going to come on. Now, you can see that one of two ways, right? It's a bit like Jota, when he's always got a chance of coming on and scoring, but at the same time he's always got a chance of blocking points. I think sometimes you get players that just start or they just stay on the bench the whole time, and then in some ways that's better, because if they stay on the bench, you've got hopefully a decent bench option to come on. So I'm not quite sure of him right now. I think it's very easy to say that he's nailed because he was embedded slowly, obviously wasn't available, gets embedded slowly, gets a goal, gets some more time, then starts the last 2 games. He's got 2 goals now, so why would they kind of swap him out, especially when Traore was struggling to actually convert the good work that he was doing. But I just think there's 4 players there to go into those 2 spots. So Trincao, Podence, Hwang and Traore. Jimenez just starts every single game, right? 90 minutes as well. So there's 4 players to go into 2 spots. So at some point you have to think he's going to get benched. The key question is, how many times will that happen? And because he's come on and played the last 2, because he's got his 2 goals as well, I think there's a good chance that he probably does get a little bit of a run now, and it might be worth the punt. But it is a punt. Now, you have to just accept that. If you buy him this week and then he gets rested, or not even rested, but he gets rotated out and then comes off the bench, and then the next week he starts, and then the week after he starts, then he's back to the bench the week after. You have to accept that's a possibility. I don't think anyone, unless they know him or they know the manager or they know someone inside the team, no one can sit here and say 100% he is definitely nailed and going to start every single match from now for the next 6 game weeks. We just can't say that. Because of his price, it might be worth the risk anyway. There's quite a split on this one. I think a lot of people who wildcarded last week definitely kind of preferred double Chelsea defence over double Man City because of that fixture in Game Week 7. But that's not the case now, right? That fixture against Liverpool is gone. And now people are actually slightly favouring double Man City defence, which I don't necessarily disagree with, to be honest. I think if you look at this fixture run here, it's so long, right, this fixture run. Which fixtures are going to be difficult to get clean sheets? And I would say Man United away, maybe West Ham at home to a certain extent, but because it's at home, that is obviously a big advantage. Brighton aren't necessarily massive goal scorers either, so they got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In this run, they've got 7 home fixtures, which is decent. And the away ones, Watford, Newcastle, Villa, Man United, Brighton. I mean, there's plenty of clean sheets there for Man City. So I definitely get why people are doing that. I also think the problem with Chelsea is just, if you knew Reece James and Chilwell or even Alonso were absolutely nailed, then they would be better than pretty much every single Man City mid, because most of them are nearly as or just as attacking as Cancelo, and they'd be nailed on as well, and they're a little bit cheaper. But the problem is they're not. So at Man City, you can get to Diaz for 6.1 million. He's only slightly more than Azpilicueta now. He's only a little bit more than Rudiger as well. Laporte has obviously started every game he's been available for as well. So if he keeps his place, 5.5 million is a bargain. And the Man City defence just is better than the Chelsea defence, right? Chelsea is very good, but I think they've only conceded 3 goals so far from about 8 expected goals conceded. So they are probably due to concede a few more. I think Aston Villa, for example, probably should have at least scored 1 goal against them. Expected goals and expected goals conceded doesn't necessarily work that, well, they should have conceded more, so straight away they're going to concede more, right? It doesn't work like that, but maybe they have been a little bit fortunate to only concede 3 so far. But we know how good their defence can be, but the Man City defence is just always a step ahead of everyone else. So I don't mind it at all. The one thing I like about the Chelsea defence is you can get in there a little bit cheaper. So let's say you're going for Cancelo and Diaz versus Azpilicueta and Rudiger. You do save a bit of money by going for the double Chelsea, although Cancelo is the most interesting out of all four of them, and obviously Diaz gives you the nailed onness as well. And I do think after this little fixture run for Chelsea, so this little one here, then it's Leicester away, Man United at home, Watford away, West Ham away as well. This little 4 fixture run just isn't as good. So I think over the next kind of 8 to 10, I would definitely be expecting more clean sheets from Man City. And I do think, as I discussed on the rating wildcards video, that there probably is an opportunity maybe, or a reason where you only go for 3 of these defenders instead of 4, like a lot of us did as well. So yeah, I got no problem at all with double Man City defence. I think it's decent. I think the one advantage that double Chelsea has is you can get in there a little bit cheaper, and if you do pick the right one from Reece James or Chilwell, if they're fit, there is probably more attacking returns than you'll get for an equivalent money in the Man City defence. There we go. Let me know if you disagree with any of the data in the graphs. Do you disagree with people's opinions? What about kind of Everton midfielders and Gallagher versus Abuemo? Am I just writing off the wrong players? Let me know in the comments below. If you did enjoy this video, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. I'll be back tomorrow with another video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.